Hey Nerdy Knitter, Tanya here. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a master hand knitter, and I'm here to help you knit garments that fit. I want you to be able to knit your garments that you want to knit and have them fit the way that you want them to fit for you or your loved ones. Now, in this video, we're going to walk through the different ways you can steek or cut your knitting. I'm going to demonstrate the different types of steek stitches that you can use, and then the different ways you can secure those stitches so you can cut them and not be worried that all of your knitting is just going to unravel. Now, this is the first step in, you can use this for any project you want. I've got a little swatch here. I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to walk you through everything I did to cut all of this knitting. But in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have a tutorial. And if it's live, by the time you're watching this video, I'll have a link for it down below where we are going to be working this cowl with a steek and then cutting it and then making a button band and all of that fun stuff. So if you'd like to have a project where you can learn how to cut your knitting, then you'll have a project that you can do that on if you want to do that with me. So this will be coming out in a couple of weeks, but if you're, depending on when you're here, when it's live, I'll put a link down below for this pattern tutorial. So what is a steek? A steek is sort of like a little bridge of knitting, some extra stitches that you're casting on to include in your project that will create an area that you can then cut open. This is often used in things like, well, fair isle knitting or other stranded knitting methods where you want to knit in the round in those areas that eventually are going to have to be flat. Like if you have to knit the upper portion of a sweater, you can't really knit this in the round and have openings for the arms. So we put steek stitches in those places that we can cut open and then have a place for our arms in that type of a sweater. There's other situations where you'd want to use that as well. In this example cowl here, the cowl was all knit in the round and then the steek stitches were cut so we could put a button band on there. So a steek is just a term that lets us create a little area of our knitting that we know we're going to cut away at some point so our project can lay flat in that area. Whether it's a whole cowl, whether it's where a neckline is placed, or where you want your sleeves to be placed eventually. Now, you don't have to limit this to just stranded knitting. If you don't like to purl and you just want to knit your project and it's going to be a cardigan though, so it's going to be cut open, then you could keep knitting in the round, put a steek in the front, even if there's no color work, and then cut those steek stitches so you can open it for a cardigan, so you don't have to knit it flat. But it is really ideal for anytime you're doing stranded knitting, especially if you don't want to do your stranded knitting flat. I can't say I love to purl when I've got more than one color going on. So adding some steek stitches is the way to go. And it's also really nice because you can sort of balance your stitch pattern. There won't be any jog because you can hide that jog right where that steek would be. And then the rest of your stranded knitting looks really nice. There's no jog anywhere because it's hidden where you've placed those steek stitches. I do want to briefly discuss yarn choice before we get right into the demonstration of how to cut your stitches. Now, the yarn I'm using here is Knit Picks Palette in some of their really nice colors. I love this pink and white together. It's my favorite. But then they also have some new colors as well. So I'll link to Knit Picks down below. That's a really good yarn for doing any sort of stranded color work, even if you have to cut your knitting, because it wants to grip itself. So if you want to use a yarn that is really going to hold its shape, and you don't have to be too concerned about reinforcement, you want to pick a yarn that is suitable for stranded knitting. A 2-ply yarn that is sticky. Like if you just look at the yarn and it looks like it really wants to hold itself together, the yarn strands want to join the other stitches around them, then that's probably a good sign that that yarn is going to hold its shape even when you cut it. And you don't have to be concerned about anything unraveling. Now, the more slippery a yarn gets, like maybe a 3-ply yarn that's really tightly twisted, even if it's a wool, it might not want to stick together as much. So you're going to want to secure that before you cut it. And I'm going to go through all of the different ways you can secure your stitches before you cut them. But then also there's plant fibers, which are very slippery. Acrylic probably doesn't want to hold its shape too well. Superwash wants to slip and slide. So all of those types of yarn, you definitely want to secure them in one method or another. And we're going to go through the different methods, but the slipperier the yarn, the more likely you are to want to secure them really well, like with something like a sewn steek stitch, where you're going to use a sewing machine to really reinforce those stitches. For very slippery yarns, that's what I recommend, but I will demonstrate all the other ways as well. Before you cut your stitches, you have to have some steek stitches to cut, and there's a couple ways you can add them. You can work them in stripes, you can work them in a checkerboard fashion, or you can do what's called a wound steek, and I'm going to show you each of these. So I've got a little steek sampler here that we're going to use to demonstrate how to secure and cut your steek. The first thing is the number of stitches. Your pattern's probably going to tell you how many stitches you need to have. In my example, I have 7 steek stitches. It starts with this lightest color over here and then alternates between a dark and finishing with the light. So I like this kind of pattern because I can pick out that center stitch very easily, and that's sort of my guide for cutting. I like that. Other options, there's the same again, 7 stitches here. Another option is a checkerboard pattern. I still have like 1 stitch in the lightest peach color on either side, and then checkerboard in between. So you can use that as well and just cut down the center of that. Another option is a wound steek instead, where you don't have steek stitches. What you do in that case is, like the first stitch, you knit it with both yarns, and then you wind both yarns around your needle like you're doing a yarn over. In this case, I think I did about 6, and then I knit with both together for this stitch here. So later on we can just cut these and tie them off, and it does make a very messy stitch on each side, but I don't think it affects like the actual stitches in the project. But that's another really great option, really great if you have like a very sticky wool. I'm using Knit Picks palette. It's a 2-ply wool that is pretty sticky, so I think that it would be fine. You wouldn't even have to secure this in any way. You could just cut these and tie them down. So these are the 3 methods for like patterning or creating your steek. So wound, checkerboard, or my preference is probably this one right here, because I think it just looks very neat. This one is also very nice and easy. It does make a mess on the inside because you have all of those ends, but if you're planning to cover it with like a double knit button band or a ribbon or something, then you're going to cover that up anyway. So those are probably my 2 preferences. So once you have your steek stitches, and not all patterns will have them. They might just have you cut right into your knitting. That's kind of a thing too in other places. But if you have stitches that you're going to use for your cutting, the next thing is to secure them in some way. Now, there are different ways of securing stitches, and we're going to go through all of those right now. First one is not to secure them at all, which is just fine. For something like this, you could cut these and then just tie them in knots on either side and cover that with a ribbon or your button band. It would be totally fine. That works if you have a very sticky fiber, like a nice good wool that's going to stick together. Not a superwash, not an acrylic or a plant fiber. Those are slippery fibers. They're not going to stick together. So you need some method for securing those steeks before you start cutting. So in that case, we're going to go through the other 3 methods. Like if you want to just cut and go, you can totally do that. But there are other ways of like securing these stitches so they're not going to all unravel. So the first step is to mark out where you're going to be cutting, or not. You don't have to do this. This is an optional step. I don't care. I don't need to, because I like this vertical line right here, and I can really see this center stitch. That's where I'm cutting. I don't need to like do anything to mark that out, so I'm just going to skip this. But if you want to, it is very helpful in the checkerboard pattern to find that center stitch, and then all in that case is I just have some embroidery floss or some sewing thread, whatever you want, and a needle, and you're just going to sort of run it up that center, go under a few bars of stitches, and then repeat. Skip a bar or 2, go under another few, skip a bar, go under another couple. Basically, we're just putting a little line in there so we know exactly where to cut. This is optional. You can do this, you don't have to, but it does give you, like, you know where you're cutting now, like it's marking out that spot. So when you have your steek stitches, it's the ones on either side, your furthest ones, that's sort of your border. You're going to use those to secure. We're going to start with like a hand stitching one. If you have a sewing machine, you would just follow along that first steek stitch all the way. Do a running stitch to secure them on either side right there. Or a couple. You could do a couple stitches if you've got a very slippery fiber and you want to make sure it's very secure. My sewing machine is packed away, and we can do the same thing with hand stitching as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that instead. If you have a sewing machine and you want to use it for that, you're just going to make sure Don't go through your whole fabric. You're just going to go through that Steek stitch and do a running stitch through all of those stitches on either side. And if it's very slippery, I would do 2, like maybe go in 1 and do another second line for that. So you want to start out with a thread. I've got it, mine's pretty short, but you want one that's about 4 times the length of whatever the area is. And you're going to start right at the bottom, finding that column of stitches. I'm just going to enter my needle in there just to get it in that first cast on edge. And hold the tail, we don't want to lose anything there. Okay, so the process here is like 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch back. So I'm in that first stitch. I'm going to come around underneath and come up in that second stitch. Getting my tail out of the way. Kind of securing it there in place. And now I'm going to go back into the first stitch. And then it's kind of, I like to do it all in one movement once I get this first one going. Into the first, and then up in the one just above where the yarn is, or the thread is right now. So the third stitch at this point. So we're just going to do this all the way up. Back where that yarn is coming out. So stitch number 2 at this point, and coming up in the stitch above. You can use, this is your guide, like you're going below it and above it as you're pulling through. So I've got this one coming out of that 4th stitch now. So we're going back into the 3rd and up through the 5th. So this is how it looks. The thread's coming out of that 4th stitch right there. My needle has gone down into the 3rd, coming up in the 5th. So you're just going to do this the whole way up. It's very simple motion once you get it set up. But you have to be able to read your stitches. We're looking at our V's and we're going into the center of each of those V's. So if you have to put it down and come back, then look at the yarn tail, or where is it coming out of. We're right in this stitch right here, so we want to go into the stitch underneath and come out in the stitch above. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back until it's all secured. So you can kind of see it in there. I did it in a color that I hoped you'd be able to see, but you might want to use like a yarn or thread that you're not going to see. It would be more invisible. But now all of those stitches have been sewn down. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So there is our first method. We've secured them on both sides. Oh, I think I skipped one in there, but I don't think I need to go back and fix that. But you want to make sure, if you're unlike me, my wool is sticky, so I think it's going to be just fine. You would pull it apart and make sure you didn't miss any stitches. You can always go back in with more thread, and you can see some spots where I must have skipped when I was talking, because it's hard to talk and do this at the same time. So if I were concerned, I could bring some more thread in and just secure those stitches. But I probably went under 2 bars instead of 1, and I wasn't paying attention. But you want to double check if you're using this method and make sure. And then you would just proceed to cut. You've secured both sides. So our next method of securing a steek is a crochet chain. So we need a crochet hook that's a couple sizes smaller than the yarn we're using, and you want some yarn, probably the same yarn that you used for your project. You're going to put a slip knot on the crochet hook. And then the process here that we're going to be using is, mine is turned upside down at the moment because I'm using the other side. So we'll flip it this way just for a second. Is we're going to be cutting right through this stitch right here. We're going to secure that stitch. One leg of it's going to be secured to the stitch on this side by working a crochet chain here along that column. And then the same on this side, we're going to work a crochet chain here along that column. So we'll have secured the stitches, and what's going to happen is it's going to pull it open, and we'll see exactly where we want to cut. We want to cut that bar that's in the center of that stitch. So we need to start by connecting it to the stitch on either side. So I'm going to actually flip mine over because I need to start here on the cast on edge. So I know this is my center stitch, and this is the stitch I want to start with. So I'm going to go down into the middle of that stitch first of all and just catch the yarn and pull it through and get a loop on my hook to the front of the work. Oops, try that again. So we want to go into the stitch that's just to the side of our center stitch that we're going to cut. And pull a loop through, and then pull it through our slip knot as well. So now we're secured. You can look at it from this direction so you can see what we're going to do. We want to grab the leg of this stitch and this stitch, just like that. There's the center stitch we're going to cut, and the stitch right beside. So we're grabbing one leg here and one leg here. Of course, we're upside down, so it looks a bit different from this angle. But once you get the first one, it's much easier to see what you want to do. And then you're just going to wrap the yarn and pull it through to secure. And you're going to do that the whole way up. So you can see where they are already. So this leg of this stitch and this leg of our center stitch, wrap the yarn, pull it through. You're going to do that up one side. And it's helpful to do this from like the cast on or in the direction of the stitches, because like right now I'm upside down, but once you get going, it's easy to tell where you have to be. You're taking half of each stitch. So as you're going, you're going to see one leg of each color if you're doing the same kind of pattern for your Steek stitches. Drop those, let's try them again. All right, next, make sure you're under the next stitch, and you want to go up one stitch at a time, making sure you get all of them. The stickier your wool, the less you have to worry about that, honestly, because it's probably going to be just fine if you miss one. But if you're concerned that something might fall apart, then you definitely want to make the time to do this properly. If you're using a slippery fiber like a superwash or a plant fiber, then yes, you might want to take a lot more care with this. So that one didn't want to work out. Let's try that again. And we haven't done anything to damage it, so if it's not the way you want it or it's the wrong place, then pull it back out and do it again. So as you can see, we're making a little progress here. So you can see the last stitch I was under, the yarn's there now, so I can just go under the next one. And it does, I mean, it looks like a V, but it just looks like the one leg is one color and one leg is the other color, and that's exactly what we want. Using that center stitch as our guide because that's where we're going to cut. Okay, so there is the first half. We're going to stop right there. So on that last one, I'm just going to pull the yarn all the way through. Oops. Split my stitch. There we go. So there is one side secured. And we want to repeat that with, go back in the correct orientation here, with the stitch on this side. We're going to connect these two legs. So we'll have secured both legs of this center stitch with the stitch beside it. So same process. Slip knot on the needle. We need to go under the edge. Now, if you have a very slippery fiber, you might want to start like work a crochet chain across all of your Steek stitches this way and secure those as well, and then start going in that direction. I don't need to do that here, but that's an option. So I'm going to go in the center of my stitch to the side of that center stitch. Get my tail, not the tail, but the working yarn, wrap it, get all of those yarn tails out of the way, pull it through, and then I'll pull it through like the slip knot that's on the needle. There, so we're secured and we're in place, and we want to do the same exact process. But now it is on the stitch to the other side. So I just need to get myself situated and get all of these yarn tails out of the way. All right, so I want to catch, so we're in, look at it from this direction this time, this leg of the stitch to the side, and then that leg of the actual stitch we're going to cut. And we're going to pull that yarn through and through there. Okay. Mine split, so here we go. Try to get the yarn through. All right, and then we're going to just repeat that process. So I caught that one, so we're going to go into the next stitch under the leg, the left leg, and then the right leg of that center stitch we want to cut. And pull that through and through that crochet loop. My yarn is a bit splitty here, so just give me a second to fix that. So same thing on this side, we're going to go under the left leg of the stitch here, and then the right leg of the stitch that we're going to cut. Go under both and then go through our crochet loop, which keeps splitting. All right, so same process all the way down until you've secured all of the stitches. So under both legs. So you'll have one leg of each color. If you did like this stripe pattern, it'll alternate and change. If you're doing the checkerboard pattern, well, you still have two different colors every time. But you're gonna, the whole point is to secure both legs of that center stitch, and then it kind of exposes where we're going to cut right in the middle. So I'm just going to continue doing this until it's done. Then we have one more method to show for securing our Steek stitches. So there is my second method. So those stitches are all secured, and when you cut, you can see exactly where you need to cut, because your Steek or your crochet chain on either side pulls those stitches apart, so we can cut right down the center of that. So that's method number 2. Third method is felting. So this is a new one for me. Haven't done this one before, and this is only going to work if your fiber is animal based and it's feltable. Not even not all animal fibers will felt the same. But if you have like a little brush surface or something underneath to hold, because your needles have to sort of stab in there, like this. Oh, this is locked right now, but you have to unlock it. And then the sharp needles are exposed, and it sort of like joins all of those stitches together as one. So hopefully this will fit over there. So all you need to do is just felt it using one of these brushes. Hopefully my swatch is wide enough for this. And felting it in place. And of course we don't want to felt the whole project, just our Steek stitches. So let me get all of my yarn tails out of the way, and we'll give this one a try. I haven't done this one before. I have used the sewn Steek and the crochet Steek, but never this one. So let's see how this does. So make sure I'm unlocked, and all of those sharp needles are just going to stab through this. And I want to make sure I stay within my border here. So all right, so that's a few minutes of just pushing that in, and it's amazing how that feels. Let's see how it looks on the inside. And this Steek was just wide enough. I just had to go up and down. It doesn't look like it's done much here, but that's how it looks on the inside. Like all of those stitches, I'd say they are like, they're not gonna go anywhere, would be my guess. We're gonna try it and see and cut. That's how the other ones look. You can see the crochet on that side and our back stitch right here. So once your stitches are secure, let's lock this up again. It's time to cut your steek and then do whatever you need for finishing. Let me get my scissors. So we've already secured the stitches here. So you would just cut down the center using that stitch as your guide. And those aren't going to go anywhere. They might unravel, but we've got our sewn stitch there. If it's very slippery, use this one and do 2 columns on either side. And then we have our felted section in the middle. Let's see how that looks. It's actually a little harder to cut through. And yeah, those stitches, I'm pulling on them, they're not going anywhere. Just that little bit of felting did all of that. That's not going anywhere. These, yes, if I pull on them, they're going to unravel some on the edge, but even then. But I am using a wool that is sort of intended for this kind of project anyway. Then our last is the crochet one, and for this one you don't want to cut your crochet chain, so you want to pull things apart and cut like the center of that stitch right there. So this one I'm going to go a little slower so I can see what I'm doing. So we've secured both legs of that stitch, so we just want to snip right down the center of it. And there we go. So 3 different methods there, and that one's not going anywhere. Those stitches are secured with that crochet chain. I really like that felting. That was fast. And it does make a little fuzzy edge. Now last one is like if you don't want to secure them at all. So you could just cut right down the center on here. I think if you're not going to secure them, go ahead and do like these wound steeks. Let me get this yarn out of the way. There. And then you can just cut them like that. And then you would take them to the inside and sort of like put them in, like if you're going to cover it with some ribbon or something like that. So those are totally unsecured steeks. They're kind of short to actually do any knotting with, so you might want longer ones if you want to put some, like tie some knots. But I suppose you could like take a few and just tie the knots, tie them all together like that. They're not too short for that. I think I wound it 6 times, and this is fingering weight yarn, so maybe 8 would give you a slightly longer length. You could just knot all of those all the way up. That would be a lot of work. I think probably the steeking is my favorite. But those are all the methods for making a steek. So the running stitch pattern, the checkerboard, or just the wound steek, and then different methods for securing your steek or not securing it. So crochet, felting, and a back stitch pattern, and then cutting it all open. And then once that's done, you can fold those steeks to the inside. You can just hand sew them down, baste them in. And then if you want a nice covering, like in the cowl here, I did a double button band. I just folded it over, and it covers up that whole steek on the inside. So you don't even see it. It's hidden right inside the button band. That's another way to hide it as well. Or if you don't want to do something like a double folded band, which does make it a little thicker because you've got the steek inside and then this double band on top, so that area is thicker. You could also put a ribbon over it, just hand sew a ribbon or machine sew a ribbon down over the steek, or just leave it. It eventually is just going to sort of felt in on itself, especially, well, if it's a sticky wool. If it's a plant fiber, it's not going to do that. But if you have a nice sticky wool, it's going to just sort of like hold itself there anyway at some point. But if you want it to look nicely finished, then you can just use a ribbon a double fold button band or something like that to cover it up. So those are our 5 methods for securing our Steek. So you cannot secure it at all. You can do one of these other methods depending on the yarn that you're using. Now you can do this on your next project, whether that's a sweater or something smaller, but coming up, we will be having this tutorial coming out depending on when you're watching this video. So if you want to try out a Steek without having a whole sweater to cut, then this is a great little project to try. It took me a couple nights to knit this very quickly. And then the steeking, and it's just nicely little finished little cowl. But that will be out soon, or depending on when you're watching this video. So I'll have a link for the pattern down below. And if you're catching this after the video is released, I'll put a video right here that takes you right to that tutorial. And you can watch that and knit along with me as we practice steeking our knitting.